we're going to call our public hearings to order. Zoning case 2021-11LU and 2021-12T. We'll start with 11LU. You're up.
Yes, sir. Okay, this is the new Sycamore Township Land Use Plan 2030. Let's see here. We have, this is just a follow-up from our last public hearing on this. One item that was omitted in this version that I was working on was the definition of mixed use in the definitions under for the future land use plan. So I will take you there right now. Okay. One thing I did update, I was able to do a better color match for the color coding on these. So I did notice that the last version of this had the old color scheme. So this is updated and more closely reflects the actual map. So these have been moved around a little bit, but no adjustments to them other than color coding. Then we get down to the mixed use definition. Mixed use describes a land development containing two or more major types of uses, typically including residential, commercial, office, and institutional. Mixed use reflects a physical and functional integration of its various components, which can be provided within a vertical mix of uses into a single mixed use building. The planned positioning of key planned components around a central public space or land use, for example, a shopping center, or through a town center urban village setting that interconnects uses through pedestrian-friendly facilities. Mixed use frequently involves stacking uses, usually residential or office uses over retail uses. The scale of mixed use is highly dependent on the context of a single urban parcel to the redevelopment of a collection of parcels within or adjacent to a developed area. So this is a bit of an all-encompassing definition. That was intentional. Not to call it the catch-all designation, but that was actually kind of flipped around during the steering committee topics, or steering committee sessions, as well as with zoning commission. Again, we're looking at, we're at 30,000 feet with the land use plan map. As we go down into the policy areas, that's where we really do the deep dive and hyper plan, so to speak, those particular neighborhoods and areas. So that is now included, and because of that flexibility with the mixed use designation, it could be developed within all of our zoning districts. With prescribed gross densities of 20,000 square foot minimums for commercial or office, along with, that should be maximums. Actually, it shouldn't have that at all. Let's see how. I'm sorry, that's just that's consistent with the other density uses that we were looking at. And then 1 to 14 dwelling units per acre, which is our residential range. Okay. We talk about principal permitted uses. It really does run the gamut here, with the condition that it be developed within a PUD. All right. The other item that I believe we had was the let's see. We come down here to Montgomery Road Central. We added an additional parcel of land here. This is a residential single-family home now, but we did include it in this to allow for future development uses. Okay. Let me see here. I believe the only other item we had on this is if I go up to Reed Hartman. We've corrected some typos on the spelling of Reed Hartman on this. Okay. Oh, that's actually Village Green. Hang on. There we go. Reed Hartman's been corrected. Okay. So, there have been some residents and stakeholders that have contacted me specifically about the land use map and how we're handling some of the church properties in the township. So I don't necessarily consider churches as a transitional use, but we are trying to look out, roughly 10 years. Churches don't always stay churches. Okay, so if we are looking for, if there's ever the next use to a property, if it were to change hands, what are we looking at? There's a lot of discussion with the Archdiocese about some of their properties. So if, for example, the St. Vincent property were to be sold and go into private hands, we have the majority of that designated as a mixed-use site. It's adjacent to our Kenwood shopping area, both along Montgomery Road and Kenwood, so that would be mixed use and would be, we'd certainly want to focus on some sort of large-scale PUD development there. I believe we have another site up north that I could show you, but first I would go to, show you the Montgomery Road corridor area. These, I believe it's 3 parcels of land right here. That's Mission Baptist Church. Is that correct, Mr. Kellums? Okay. Just north of, I believe that's Sturbridge. So we are designating that office as a potential future use there. That's not to say we're advocating for, or there's something lined up. But if there were a future use there, what would be most appropriate? So we did designate that as a potential office property. Keep in mind that the Montgomery Road Central Corridor or policy area specifies very low density
Right.
office that actually mimics, it would be 1 or 2 story that's limited in net floor area per acre, as well as having residential aesthetics. So if it did back up to this residential these residential areas, there would be a lot of consideration for proper transitioning.
Net floor area per acre, by the way, that's total floor space, all floors combined if it's 2-story, correct?
Yes, sir.
It's not footprint.
Right. So yes, it is significantly reduced. Okay. Let's see. The only other area I can think of where a church property is potentially flipped. Let's see. I'll tell you what. Let's see. Up here, this is Fields Erdel Road, Reed Hartman Highway. There's actually a church back here along I-275. Tracy, do you remember the name of this church?
I do not.
Yeah,
Right at the end of Brookbridge. Is it Brookbridge? Was that Doug Street, Brookbridge?
No.
What was it?
Weskin.
Weskin.
Okay. At any rate, there is a large parcel of land. Its only access is through a residential area.
Southwick.
Yeah. If this property were to ever shift hands, because of how it's situated adjacent to the subdivision, with no other reasonable access, we're calling for future suburban residential in this area
Makes
to
sense.
mirror, to mirror that adjacent neighborhood. So again, we're trying to be very considerate of adjoining residential uses all throughout this plan. If you do see a shift in use designation, it's always keeping in mind that we're trying to protect and preserve those residential uses while still promoting some opportunity for economic growth. Okay. I believe the only other item that's come up since then is the designation of the approximately 16 acres of I guess forest preserve land that the township is in possession of along School Road and Fields Erdel Road. There's been some discussion about whether to whether to leave that as Parks and Recreation land or to just call it vacant, just like we do with properties adjacent to Reed Hartman Highway. I'm sorry, Cross County Highway.
Cross County.
Yeah, thank you. So looking back through prior plans, as well as how we've advertised the property or marketed the property with engineers maps, even going I think out onto Google Maps, we're always designating this as a forest preserve. So having it as parkland doesn't really concern me, but maybe if we are going to keep it as part of our park system per se, maybe we need to more formally designate it as a natural preserve moving forward.
Which I think makes sense.
Yeah. So we can certainly promote, a variety of vegetation in that area, but as far as having any type of active recreation or anything, I think we protect against that through some kind of preservation policy, and not change it here in this plan.
Makes sense.
That's all I have for this. Unless there's any questions.
I've got one. You brought up the minimum square footage on the mixed use item, but on page 3-9 for office, there's a gross density 20,000 square foot minimum there. Just want to make sure that's correct.
Well, I think so. What we're going for there is, so when we talk about those uses, we're not setting up guardrails on this where we don't allow for anything smaller. It's kind of it's a goal. What we're looking for with new development is a 20,000 square foot minimum building. Okay, we don't want to break this up or underutilize lots. So it's more aspirational than regulatory.
But it's still limited by the neighborhood corridor restrictions that we're talking about, such as Montgomery Road, which would be 8,000 square
Yes,
foot.
the policy areas would supersede that.
Okay.
Yep. So
Thanks.
again, think of it's multi-step, but when we're looking at the land use plan, 30,000 feet with the maps and their designations, drilling down to the policy areas. Once you have an idea of where you want the property to go, then you're going in front of zoning commission with either a PUD 1, PUD 2, and then the trustees. So we're constantly narrowing this down, going from the aspirational guidelines to the more regulatory standards. We have a lot of control over the final outcome of our future developments and redevelopments.
Let me ask you this too then, since this is just the high level plan of how we think it ought to be, essentially, in 2030, is there anything we can or should do to further implement those corridor restrictions to make sure that those are definitive now? For
Sure.
example, Montgomery Road area.
So a major component of all of our policy areas is an implementation strategy. So if you look at each one of those policy areas, it actually calls out what we can do moving forward to move the needle toward these desired outcomes. For instance, the Montgomery Road Central policy, it actually talks about establishing a new SPI overlay district for that Montgomery Road corridor. Okay, so that's something that we need to take back to zoning commission and to the board of trustees and come up with new regulation or a new text amendment for our resolution.
So do you have a timetable in mind for that now?
Well, we're working on, we've already started the ball rolling with more comprehensive text amendments, or even a complete overhaul of our zoning resolution with Hamilton County. We're informally partnering with them right now. So those types of regulatory strategies should be considered while we're doing that. So I say in progress, but I don't have a particular date on my calendar of when it's gonna hit. It's already ongoing.
Yeah, let's just keep it moving once we have this plan in place so we
Yes,
can
sir.
get it done.
Yep. Okay.
Any other questions?
No. I'm good.
Good.
I've been in the weeds on this one for a few years, so I'm okay. I'm good.
You're good.
I will say there's already work to be done with a new steering committee and with zoning commission this year. I said that this was going to be a foundational document. We already have ideas to add to this to flesh it out, and we have 2 openings right now on our steering committee. So
Good.
things to consider in upcoming meetings.
Good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody here wish to speak to this? Yes. If you want to come up to you can come up to the podium and just give us your name and address for the record, that'd be great.
Do you normally swear people in when you talk at these?
Yes.
Sir, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
My name is James Stanley. I live at 8253 Montgomery Road. And I guess what I'd like to ask first is, I was at the last meeting, and the discussion was made about changing the designation from the previous plan to this plan from residential suburban to office. Now, I see in the color coding it's still showing residential suburban. What does, instead of office in the color coding, it's showing residential suburban for my property.
Give me 1 second.
Sure.
You're right.
I think
So-
that's accurate. I think you did. I thought I did see that as well.
Is it that way?
I think it is.
Okay.
Double check it.
Let
Double
me
check it.
let me go to that. But yeah, so just to be clear, it is now in the policy area. I apologize. I was having all kinds of trouble with cages, which is why we don't have road labels on here. And
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's still.
it is, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Can we, if we do move to an approval tonight, can it be with that amendment
Yes.
noted? Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
should we do that, or should we have an intact document we approve?
You can do it with just noting that amendment.
Amendment. I'll change the map to reflect the office designation.
Good.
We all agree on the office
Yes.
designation.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And you'd also mentioned at that meeting that you were going to include it with the southern corridor, with the Montgomery Road corridor, as opposed to the central corridor. Is there a reason that was changed?
No, my notes said central corridor.
I think I do remember Central actually.
Yeah.
I would-
Was
I
it?
would- Yeah. I would
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
Central.
I think the cutoff was right there at that intersection.
At Goldberg.
This is
Yeah.
also more adjacent to established residential than some of the uses in the more southern Montgomery
Mhm.
Road
So-
area. So it fit better with the central.
Central being the northern section.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I
I,
understand.
Yeah.
I think
and
Mr.
I
Stanley may
apologize
be
for that.
correct.
There is in the northern section of Sycamore Township. There's another piece of Montgomery Road. So.
Oh, okay.
So from basically north of the Galbraith Road intersection to Kennedy,
Kennedy Lane.
is really Kennedy Lane is really more central
Mhm.
than anything
Okay.
else.
I
I think
understand.
Mr. Stanley may be correct, though, that initially the plan was for the other area, and I remember I suggested I thought it would work better in the central, and I remember we had some discussion. I don't remember where we ended up, and that's
Right,
why
I
I
don't-
called.
yeah.
Yeah, we did
Right.
go back and forth with it, but I thought the consensus at the last meeting was for central. So
And I thought you had suggested Galbraith was the barrier on Central versus.
Yeah, that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah, I think that's what it was. Okay.
According to the minutes, he suggested it be placed in the Montgomery Road policy area as opposed to the central Montgomery Road policy area to allow for more flexibility for the small size of the site. So am I talking apples and oranges here?
I think we're still talking apples and oranges because any type of development, so you are somewhat more restricted in that central, but you are adjacent to other residential uses. At the end of the day, you're going to be in here with a PUD plan on such a small site. So There's,
Okay.
you know, you're going to have to design any type of commercial activity on that site is going to have to be catered to the, you know, the physical restraints of the site.
Right.
So the PUD is going to, that PUD is going to dictate how it gets laid out versus, you know, any type of guidelines in this.
Okay, so to restate, it's included in the central Montgomery Road corridor, and the color coding will be office.
Yes.
Correct.
Is that agreed?
I agree. Thank
Okay, great.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak this evening?
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
If you give us your name and address for the record, that'd be great.
I'm Charles Begley, and this is Sheila Begley, and we live on A228 Pine Cove Court, which is off Snyder Road. And we're here to talk just a little bit about this property along School Road and Fields Erdel. We live adjacent to that. And I wanted to say that I think you guys are definitely on the right path with this property. Every kind of wildlife that lives around here is found there. We have successfully nesting hawks about every 2 or 3 years. Falcons, and sharp-shinned hawk, red-tailed hawk. We have great horned owls that have turned up in people's yards, successfully raised. Quite a story, that. And a number of other owls, and all sorts of creatures are there. You have foxes, just kind of everything, really. It has a nice little creek running through it that has fish in it. Stream darters are very common, nothing special, but they're there. And the thing is that if the township were to put a path through there even, it would change all of that. Because a lot of these creatures, the hawks, we had golden eagles stop for the first time. They fly through about twice a year, but this guy stopped and had a good look around. They don't tolerate people walking through at all. They won't nest. So, you know, like, it doesn't work to have a picnic table, but to just leave it as a property that the wildlife can use as a landing spot, a home, or just a place to traverse through and going to other areas is very important. And we hope that you will move forward with that in mind. The forest is turning over, and there's a possibility of maybe putting some improvement in there. In other words, helping nature along instead of letting it turn into brambles, maybe planting some trees. And we, in the past, have done that in that property. Our daughter.
Our plan is to come here in the future with a plan.
Yes.
To improve this property, to improve the food, etc., for the wildlife that are there, and to make sure that we plant tall trees that are native to southern Ohio, and other trees that provide nice food, looking at understory as well as overstory type trees. So we're highly in favor of having that park property rather than vacant property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the nature preserve, do we have a category for that? Nature preserve?
It would still be, so we would still consider it part of our park system.
Okay.
Okay. I just think we need to, well, there's a couple of ways we can implement this, but we need some kind of formal designation from the trustees, you know, some sort of commitment for either wildlife or just natural preservation. Okay. You know, as far as you know, strategies to improve upon a natural preserve, that sounds like a great project for for the Parks Department. not to kick that can, but
Well, the Parks
I'm
Committee.
gonna punt on that one. It's not uncommon to have master plans for active recreation and natural preserves. If there's things that we can do, to be better stewards here, that sounds like a great standalone project. So, but I don't. I don't see that there's a need for anything in an actual land use plan, unless you want a standalone policy area for this at some point. But I think there's other documents and, like I said, standalone, policy commitments from the board that can address that as well.
Sure.
One thing I'm going to bring up, since we're here talking about that, so these are 2-foot contours. I don't know if you can see these that well on your map, but for every line you're dropping 2 feet. There's, I believe, I counted this up at some point, but I believe from School Road to the actual streamline, I think there's over a 40-foot drop in elevations.
That makes sense.
You can see there's a lot of little tributaries that come into this area. This is actually a floodplain layer that I have up here. This would be not only is it thick with vegetation, it's it's not really desirable land for a lot of active recreation anyways.
It would be a very challenging site to do
Right.
anything to.
And by challenging, I think Tracy means expensive. So
Which is
Well,
true.
I mean,
I think the natural
Talking
preserve
challenge.
designation is a great way to be good stewards of this land.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
So that
I can
would be-
remember how deep that, how big of a drop that was. When we first acquired that property, I was out there with one of the guys from Tracy's crew, and it's steep.
It is.
It's pretty steep going down to the bottom there.
So is that going to be then coded to be parks or?
It already is parks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So what we need is is either a plan or some kind of policy commitment specifically for this site, designating it as preservation. It's already been treated that way.
Yes.
I mean,
We've been
So-
treating it that way for years.
yeah, we can formalize it, and that takes care of
Yep,
that.
that's fine.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. Stanley, who's in our audience, is quite the expert when it comes to trees in Ohio.
I agree with what I heard here.
Good deal.
Get your name and number and all that so that we can talk to someone, because we've been talking to a lot of different people in different states, et cetera, also.
Is there anybody else who wants to speak to this land use plan? If not, we're going to close our public hearing on 2021-11 LU and open up 2021-12 T. Mr. Miller.
Okay. Well, all right. So I apologize for the skew here, but I was trying to show these two kind of the changes in the text of our zoning resolution. So as you stated, this is case number 2021-12T. Essentially, we started off with a very aggressive, I would even say a comprehensive overhaul of the entire resolution. And because we were already going through the land use plan changes, I took those text amendments to our steering committee, our land use steering committee, because any good changes or any good zoning resolution is contingent upon a comprehensive plan. So it made sense to have them look at it and see, does our text, does our actual land use regulation meet the aspirations that we're going for in this plan? The steering committee very quickly said, what we should be doing is looking at our text amendments, or excuse me, our zoning text a little more regionally. There was an opportunity coming up that Mr. Pete Mallow was aware of because he's on the Hamilton Planning Commission of a regional kind of universal code, and it was just getting off the ground. There'd be an opportunity for us to join them. So I've reached out to the county. I've actually been interviewed by their planning consultant on this. They're very interested in getting our input on this, and I think there's an opportunity for us to use the same language, terminology, be on the same page with a lot of our peers in the county. But it's also going to be a modular document, so we can pick the pieces out of it that we need, that's pertinent to us. We're obviously not going to, regulate the same way that Crosby Township or Amberley Village does per se. But there may be components in there that we can grab and utilize for our purposes. So with that being said, we stopped the review of the comprehensive overhaul, and we just asked ourselves, what are some day-to-day issues that we have with the code? And with that came some very modest modifications. The first one has to do with how we calculate accessory uses in rear yards. In my mind, the way the current language is specified, it actually limits free use of your rear yard. It overly limits how much you can do or how much you can enjoy your property. So the current language, and all we're doing is changing one word here, but let's see. It says that, no accessory use or structure shall be located in the front or side yard in the total combined area of all accessory structures shall not occupy more than 35% of the required area of the rear yard. And all I'm doing is changing that to 35% of the total area of the rear yard. So this doesn't sound like a huge change, but the required area of a rear yard, let's say in a typical zoning district is 35 feet. So if you have a 100-foot width property and the required yard is 35 feet, we're going to measure 100 by 35, and that's the total area that you have that we're going to calculate. So you get 35% of that. Okay. So the problem with that calculation is it doesn't take into account any depth of your yard. So whether you're sitting on an acre or two, if your property is the same width as your neighbor, you get the same calculation. So by going to the total depth of the rear yard, it's giving you a little more available land in your rear yard for those accessory uses. So I consider this enabling regulation for our residential property owners. Okay. The other item that we have has to do with fences. I won't sit here and read this verbatim, but we have some issues with our fences. So number one, we don't typically allow any fences in front yards. Okay, so what I'm talking about is either side yard or rear. So if you want to enclose the side yard of your property, you can do that with a 4-foot fence. But it's a 4-foot fence that has at least 75% open. Okay, so the difference between a 75 and less means that you're allowed to have a Kentucky 3-board fence, but you can't have a Kentucky 4-board fence. Okay. You also can't have a picket fence, so you can't have something nice and traditional. I'm not sure why we care about the distinction between a Kentucky 3-board and a Kentucky 4-board. Okay. Or even if it's a fully opaque fence at 4 feet tall. So I've essentially modified this language so that it does not have any type of opacity calculation. Okay, and also we have a lot of residential properties. Instead of having a traditional rear opening to their house, they might have one on the side. We get a lot of requests for privacy fences in the side yard, and I don't want to say it's arbitrary, but we have to look at the character of our neighborhoods and what impact there would be if we allowed privacy fences in the side yard as well as the rear. Especially if somebody has a privacy fence in the rear and then this weird step down to a 4-foot fence, and we get those requests as well. So the solution was to not allow privacy fences all the way up to the front face of the house, but to allow for a setback of at least 1/4 of the total depth of the house. So you're allowed to enclose a portion of your side yard with a privacy fence, a 6-foot privacy fence, but it has to be offset from the front face of the house. Okay. So again, I also consider this a type of enabling regulation, and it allows for better and freer use of property. Okay. So again, you can't bring a fence up all the way to the front face of your house. There is a 1/4 setback, and that
We had
was
some conversation, if I recall, about access to garages that oftentimes come off the side, and people that want to let their dogs out or something like that, and they can't
Yep.
do it because
Yeah.
the fence
Right,
the fences
or-
are required to start
yeah.
at the back of the house.
Yeah.
So this provides some flexibility to allow that fence to come part way up,
Mhm.
part way towards the front of the house, but not all the way to the front face.
Yeah, there's a lot of variations on this language. We looked at, do we just set a standard of it's got to be 8 feet back? Well, that doesn't necessarily always address every property. So through it's actually kind of an evolution of first the steering committee and then zoning commission. Zoning commission actually made the final recommendation for the 1/4 standard.
Yeah, proportionate makes sense.
It's proportionate. It makes sense. Again, we're trying to provide a little more freedom and good use of property to our residential property owners.
That's a good
So
thing.
it also allows for property owners to kind of better match up their fence lines with their neighbors.
Yeah.
We see a lot of issues where those are always offset.
Sure.
Yeah.
This would give some flexibility there.
Okay. Any questions?
So you are proposing these specific changes for us to approve now, or where are we with this? This is the first time I've actually seen this printed language, I think.
Yeah, I have a resolution ready to go. This is very straightforward, super simple. And I do apologize. I thought this was on the website. I apologize for that oversight. I do have a resolution ready to go for this tonight. If you would be more comfortable.
Under your report, planning and zoning, correct?
What's that?
Under your planning and zoning report, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm happy to discuss this in more detail with the trustees. We can do a first reading tonight. I'm flexible. My goal was to get the land use plan adopted first. That's just good planning practice and a good principle we should adopt. As far as the text amendments, I don't necessarily want to delay in this because I have fence applications on my desk, but I'm flexible.
Is a resolution to send this to the planning commission, or has it already been to the planning commission?
So currently we do not submit anything to planning commission except our land use plan.
Not the text amendments?
No, we do. We don't receive any advisory review from planning commission. It is one of the things I'm actually hoping to change, and I've already started conversations with them. But we're out of their system right now. So they do. We did request informal comments from their staff on the land use plan, and they are requiring us to submit the land use plan after it's been approved by the Board of Trustees. So why they want to...
Hope they like it.
Interesting
Yeah,
process. Okay.
So I had that conversation. Do we send it? Do we send that to them first, and then it's ratified, I guess, by the trustees, or what?
Well, if
But
they-
they said, no, it needs to come to us after.
And if they come back and say they don't like something, can we
too
tell them to
bad.
go jump in a lake?
Uh,
Yeah, right?
Or I don't know, do I take it to, I'll have to,
I mean, it might be a constructive comment,
Yeah.
but it might also be something we
Sure.
can ignore, correct?
You can ignore it.
We can ignore
Just
it.
as long as it's done.
I might be having a conversation with Larry. Does this go back to zoning commission and then the trustees, or just back to the trustees?
Well, the land use plan, though, is meant to be a living, sort of a breathing document that's intended
Yeah.
to be revisited
Right.
on
Yeah.
a regular
And-
basis,
and-
so.
and, you know, and our land use plan is just one puzzle piece in a much larger, regional, plan in a sense for the county. I kind of understand that.
One other question, were these text amendments approved unanimously by the zoning commission then?
Yes, actually, I have.
Is there anybody else here this evening who wants to speak to 2021-12T? Any other questions from the board? If not, we will close our public hearing and open up our meeting at 7 p.m.